Hello friends, welcome back. Welcome back to Strategic Management. We were talking about generic competitive strategies. We took a cue from the life cycle of an organization. We tried to look at three basic forms which would come to us in a natural way: growth, saturation and decline. And if we drive these, then it would be growth, stability and turnaround strategy. And then we talked about cost differentiation and focused market and a broader market, and that is how four quadrants were discussed, and those were taken as strategic steps. In the meanwhile, while we are going for that, we are continuously associating everything which we are discussing with the perspective of the vision which we have been carrying forward and the business vision which comes henceforth, and mission which is a broader framework. We talked about this distinction earlier as well, and repeatedly I will keep on defining this kind of a distinction for you till the end of the course, that every organization may have a business vision, but that might not be directing itself towards the betterment of the society. Prosperity and opulence. And prosperity and opulence, we have always seen, if that is the objective, organizations are relied upon. And if organizations are relied upon, you have a loyal value chain resource of loyal value chain partners, loyal human resource, loyal customers. And if the customers are growing, as and when they grow, they also become loyal. And then speedily you start growing. We have many such examples. I have continuously been talking about, Indian Railways, SBI on one hand, Tata's on the other side, Patanjali on the other side, several multinationals and so on. And several organizations which are there as part of our lives. You would realize that, they are not advertising, but they are there part of our lives, hero cycles. Continuous growth for n number of years with a very loyal value chain and base of, growing loyal customers, growing number of loyal customers. How is it happening for Hero? How is it happening for Tata's, Patanjali, SBI and so on? Are they focusing just on growth strategy? And to do that, they are focusing just on cost and differentiation and focused market or a broader market? Are they doing just that? Or are they continuously fundamentally innovating upon to bring in newer products and go for a different kind of a strategic sphere on high differentiation based strategic sphere? Are they just doing that? Are they continuously changing their positioning? If you would go into the answers to these questions, you would realize that no, they are not doing that much in terms of continuously differentiating themselves. They are working hard on that, but simultaneously they are very well aligned to their vision and mission through ethics and ethical means. I am not saying that others are not ethical, or I am not comparing anyone with anyone here, but I am talking of examples who are following ethics, strong ethics and ethical code of conduct, which actually is as good as a strategic choice. We started our journey of understanding strategy, strategically managing things and management of strategy with the perspective of core values and culture as well. If you have ingrained ethics in your core values and culture, that actually keeps the complete fiber intact, the value chain intact, the value web intact. We will be talking about that when we would be referring to value webs for several kinds of organizations, that they hold the complete value web. That means they are holding several value chains along with them. And India, Tata's is one of those conglomerates. That is why I am continuously using their example or their story as well, starting from explaining vision to mission and so on. So, we are continuously building upon these kind of examples. But the point is that if you will look at it closely, the ethical standards which these organizations they have built up, those ethical standards and their ethics itself has started, projecting itself as a strategy with strategic relevance. Just look into these stories and you would realize what I am trying to tell you here, and I will be actually building upon my next argument on this kind of a premise here. So, everything woven through ethics drives itself with a steady or a faster speed, and that is where we are compelled to call ethics as a strategy. A business that makes nothing but money is a poor business, Henry Ford said once. Henry Ford realized that long back, and Martin Luther King says that time is always right to do what is right. We have to choose the element of right. Right is usually directed towards the benefit of all, for the gain of all, for societal development at large, for this world to be a better and a happy place for all. So, any of the actions and activities which I am doing at this moment should be directed for the betterment of the society and for the betterment of all at the end of the day. What is business ethics? And we would be building our case from understanding business ethics for and to going towards taking a stand or taking I would say a side of calling ethics as strategy itself. So, what is business ethics? Business ethics is the application of ethical principles and standards to actions and decisions of business organizations and conduct of their personnel. We all understand this. I will be talking about this briefly in some of the other sections as well, because this is a very important element which brings in endurance to the organization's journey. Ethical behavior in business situations requires adhering to generally accepted norms about right or wrong conduct. As a consequence, company managers have an obligation, indeed a duty, to observe ethical norms when crafting and executing strategy. What kind of products are we producing? How are we producing those products? If we are answering both of these questions simultaneously, that means we are focusing upon whole of our value chain to be ethical and following ethical standards. What kind of a pricing we are keeping for all such products? Are those products essentials, and should we be keeping an optimal price for those products to be purchased by large number of customers because those are essentials? Medicines, for example. I would not go into the debate of ethics here. I am talking about using or focusing upon ethics as strategy with strategic orientation. Why? Because if that is there, then you somehow will visualize or will witness things propelling themselves, strategic steps propelling themselves. And then if strategic steps are propelling themselves, that means you have created a system which is working very well, almost in a self-propelled form, or automatically. I should not be using this word automatically, but still in a self-propelled form, and it is taking you towards your vision. And prosperity and opulence is the byproduct of such kind of a process, usually and always. Then everyone is happy, and you are immune to several kinds of environmental forces which may bind you to lose your concentration in due course of time. But if it is going smoothly, then environmental forces might not compel you to lose your concentration, because then competition might not compel you to think and focus just on competition, because you have a loyal customer base which is growing. Where do ethical standards come from? Notions of right and wrong, fair and unfair, moral and immoral are present in all the societies and cultures, in terms of product choices, in terms of human resource policies, in terms of the machinery and the raw material we are using, in terms of the kind of pollution we might generate, in terms of environmental friendliness we must have in the processes, and so on. Even sometimes you would witness organizations changing their businesses completely and radically to answer such kind of questions with an ethical benchmark. There are distinct schools of thought about the extent to which ethical standards travel across cultures, and whether multinational companies can apply the same set of ethical standards in any or all locations where they operate. Let us see what these schools of thought say, which is very important for us to understand here itself, because we have been talking of larger markets, larger number of people, society and so on. And while talking about these, I always remember such kind of organizations like Indian Railways having large number of employees base and very large number of customer base, Tatas and several kinds of conglomerates touching the lives of millions of people. You see, it is a huge number we are talking of. So, business ethics schools of thoughts, the school of ethical universalism. it holds that the most fundamental conceptions of right and wrong are universal and apply to members of all societies. If something is not good for me, that is not good for you as well. So, you see, do not do something to others which you do not want to be done to yourself. So, that kind of a universalistic perspective. So, right and wrong are universal and apply to the members of all societies, all companies and business people. This is how we should be working, this is how we should be behaving, this is how we should be living our lives, this is how our actions would affect the environment or the people and so on. I would not differentiate businesses here, but and I wish to refrain from that kind of a discussion, but try and choose two different kinds of products and keep a child in your mind. If some of you are parents or look around, young children in your families, even if you are not parents, and try and find out, go to a large shopping mall, look into several kinds of shops, try and find out that which of those products and which of the things available there are good for your children and not which are the products which are not good or not so good. Then look into those organizations and their orientation and the perspective, and you would realize what I am talking about. I am not denouncing anything, but try and focus upon this subject with the perspective of an elder in your house or a child in your house, and you would understand this. Demonstrating integrity of character, not cheating or harming people, and treating others with decency are concepts that resonate with people of virtually all cultures and religions. Universalism. Every culture and religion takes us towards best, that is, we should be living our lives happily, in harmony with others as well as nature. How to do that? That can be a business choice, that can be an economic choice, and here we are focusing upon businesses and organizations and not non-profit, not profit organizations also, and other organizations as well like institutions, but primarily with a business kind of a perspective, because there is a binding force of profits and profitability which guides our decisions many times, and following ethical standards may compel us to to look at dipping down profits for a while, but remember this, and we will be going for such kind of examples in due course of time wherein you would feel convinced that following ethical standards and ethics as strategy for a long time brought those organizations towards a continuous trajectory of growth despite of dips they would have faced. The school of ethical relativism holds that differing religious beliefs, customs and behavioral norms across countries and cultures give rise to multiple sets of standards concerning what is ethically right or wrong. Relatively it is good, relatively it is not so good. That is also a call. But you see, and I am not saying that relativism is better or universalism is better, but today we are living in a globalized world. We have large number of organizations which are operating several nations in several countries. So, is there a specific religion or culture of organizations? I do not feel so. They have to look at customers as customers wherever they are. Google, Amazon, several others, almost every organization, if you would realize, are multinational organizations as of now. Should they be having reservations on which culture they belong to originally? I do not think so. They are operating for large number of customers and customers are kings for them, and their actions are socially oriented. That means they are focusing upon benefiting all the societies, all the nations universally. These differing standards means that whether business related actions are right or wrong depends on the prevailing local ethical standards. It might deviate a bit, but the point is that in today's globalized world, universalism might hold slightly a larger space as far as its presence and existence goes. And if you will look at the ethical benchmarks which organizations create and follow ethics as strategy, you would realize that they are more universalistic as far as their approach goes. Then Kellett, Thompson, Strickland and Gamble talk about integrative social contracts theory as well. This provides a middle position between the opposing views of ethical universalism and ethical relativism. So, authors they have brought us a solution here that we should not be choosing that or this. There is a middle path and a frame as well. According to this theory, the ethical standards a company should try to uphold are governed by both. How? A limited number of universal ethical principles that are widely recognized as putting legitimate ethical boundaries on behaviors in all situations. That is why we talked about that there are values which are fundamental. You would remember that we had that discussion. And then the second point which authors contribute here in integrative social contracts theory is that the circumstances of local cultures, traditions and values that further prescribe what constitutes ethically permissible behavior in that particular culture, attuning yourself to those cultural values. For example, red color is more preferred because of cultural values in some country, might be white in some country, green in some country, yellow in some country, cyan in some country, magenta somewhere, those kind of things. So, that can be done and that can be utilized for as far as gaining customer loyalty, but definitely authors have rightly said that it should be a universal kind of a perspective which we should follow. Objective is prosperity, opulence, customer loyalty and value chain partners loyalty and human resource loyalty, and you would realize that human resource retention actually leads towards financial gains through customer loyalty. Why should company strategies be ethical? Now, this is an important question and that is what we are trying to discuss. There are two reasons why a company strategy should be ethical, and we are taking author's point of view and then I will try to build upon that case, the case on that, because here we have to think of that should we be thinking that ethics can be taken up as strategy, and if that is there, then it is very simple, just focus on the core values, try to be ethical as much as you can, and if it is bringing fruits, then definitely it would bring business growth and so on, and we will try to prove this here, or we will try to come on the same page wherein organizations have done that, following ethical benchmarks and standards have led their growth, and ethics being a universal strategic choice coupled up with micro level strategy executions and strategic steps, they have grown too big. That is what we will see. You may debate that others are also growing, but to what extent, what would be the lifespan and how much longer the life would be, that always remain in question. So, strategy that is unethical is morally wrong and reflects badly on the character of the company and its personnel, and may result in a wide ranging set of other costly consequences. For example, you are fighting litigations. For example, you are not having a loyal human resource which is leaving you time and again, and then you have to hire more people, and hiring has a cost also, training has a cost also, and then by the time you bring them to that kind of a stage, they again leave. So, if organizations are having large level of attritions, how would they retain their customers for that matter? This may also be debated that many organizations, they have large customer base or loyal customer base, but not having high level of retention as far as human resource goes. But there my argument is, and you would realize that in due course of time, that those organizations which are not having high level of human resource retention and having large level of customer retention might be because of that there are no large substitutions, and if substitutes are there, customers are actually looking for alternatives, and that is what we realize when times they dip down. So, the second point is that an ethical strategy can be good business and serve the self interest of shareholders at the end of the day. Now, the cost companies incur when ethical wrongdoing is discovered. Now, these are the costs which are directly associated with as far as the whole situation goes, and that is why ethics can be called as a strategy by the perspective of the cost itself, and the gains which we will be talking about in due course of time, those add immensely in this argument when we say ethics is strategy. So, visible costs are there, government fines and penalties, huge litigation costs, penalty costs and so on, and every day you would hear that government has levied these kind of fines on this kind of organizations, and these kind of extra taxes they have to pay or whatsoever. Several kinds of news clippings are there, just Google that. Civil penalties arising from class action lawsuits and other litigation aimed at punishing the company for its offences and the harm done to others. Sometimes I have seen, and you would also realize, there are so many documentaries available nowadays wherein an organization comes to a region, they start huge factories, lot of employment gets generated, people get moved that this organization is bringing prosperity to us, but that organization discharges so many pollutants in that region and city that whole of the city falls sick. At the end, employment rises, but the cost of living and cost of health rises much beyond employment, and the productive life reduces, and ultimately that employability or employment does not matter at the end of the day. Just an example. So, and then civil lawsuits and those kind of things, they come in, or class action suits, lawsuits, they come in. The costs to shareholders in the form of a lower stock price also evolves in due course of time. Then there are internal administrative costs, legal and investigative costs incurred by the company. You have to fight a war. Competition is looking at these kind of vulnerabilities you have. They might hit you straight with advertising against you. They might hit you through different kinds of litigations. They might hit you through stock markets and so on. And if they are more ethical as compared to what you have been following, and they are strongly ethical, they might not hit you, but they would have anyways larger customer base and customer loyalty, which would be detrimental to you. The costs of providing remedial education, ethics training to company personnel definitely would be there. The costs of taking corrective actions would be there. Sometimes, and we have talked now revisit that graph which we talked about in terms of growth, dips in growth, then growing up, and then saturation, and then decline. Look at that graph, or some other graph which you may follow through the history of organizations. You would realize that if you are somehow not being so ethical, and you are paying the cost through direct costs and indirect costs of losing customers, and which becomes direct costs in terms of idle production capacity or whatsoever. So, if you are going through that kind of a phase and you wish to go for taking corrective actions, that time which you would realize for rejuvenating yourself is a highly cost intensive kind of a time, wherein your profitability is low and your cost structure might not allow you to rise back, and then at the end of the day it would be a decline kind of a situation. Administrative costs associated with ensuring future compliances and so on. Now, there are intangible or less visible costs also, and these are the most important, because many times when we are not following ethical principles, we are not actually looking and visualizing such costs. Customer defections, which is the most evident thing, but sometimes we overlook that. Many organizations which they face their demise or decline, the prime reason you would find is it lies here. Loss of reputation. This is a very big cost in fact. If you have lost your reputation, then even if you are trying to rejuvenate, it won't work, because you have lost that reputation. That includes trusts, brand value and so on. Lost employee morale and higher degrees of employee cynicism. Newer employees might not come to you because a word is already sent out that this organization is not worth working for or worth working with. Higher employee turnovers, higher recruiting costs and difficulty in attracting talented employees. If a word of mouth spreads in the higher education institutions that this organization is not worth going for, that won't happen. Adverse effects on employee productivity, the costs of complying with often harsher government regulations. Now, here I would give you a positive example. Indian Space Research Organization ISRO attracts finest of the talents from around the world, especially Indian talent from best of the institutions, despite of the fact that they are a government organization which has a particular limitation on extending direct salaries and including perks also. There is a specific frame of what they can do best for their employees, but then they are able to attract the finest of the talent from all over, especially Indian talent. They actually look forward to work for such kind of organization, and ISRO is an important growth story. ISRO is an important story which tells about loyalty of value chain partners, loyalty of human resource, productivity of human resource, and the output and the benefit which they are extending to their, to the nation as well as people who are associated with them as beneficiaries and customers. This story tells us that ethics actually is a strategy. And if you will realize the intensity with which ISRO is growing, the kind of output which they have brought in due course of time, you would realize that it is a marvel and an example for us in terms of organizations adapting strategy and organizations choosing strategic steps to go forward while having a strong orientation towards their vision and directing that vision towards a frame of mission and choosing objectives through ethical benchmarks using ethics as strategy. If you will go into this story, you would realize that our discussion is relevant and is important. Sometimes there are some examples from where we wish to learn lessons from. Satyam Computers, there is a case study in financialexpress.com, you would realize and you would study. So, this case study has been talked about many a times, and I am not saying that somehow these things are always done deliberately. I am saying that sometimes we actually are short of that how ethical we could have been. That is the point. If we would have gone for that kind of a perspective in using ethics as a strategy, then probably Satyam would have been a different kind of a story altogether in India, although Mahindras are doing well when they acquired Satyam. Maggi noodles, it is also a talked about story, and so on. So, there are several stories which give us lessons. There are stories which tell us that they are following continued ethical standards and benchmarks, and they do not have to dip down, as in the case of Maggi sales declined in 2015 and then they slowly tried to pick up. But if that would not have dipped down, this graph would have been much higher. That is what I presume. I do not know how many people would agree with me. That is just my perspective and analysis. So, I would be coming back to you with more objective perspective on ethics being a strategy, how organizations are doing that, which kind of organizations are exactly deploying ethical standards and benchmarks as strategic steps in my next session. Till then, just build upon this perspective which I have submitted to you. I will be catching up back with you. Till then, goodbye.